Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other.
Imagine this. A man walks into the world carrying something sacred. Not muscles, not charm, not ambition, but weight. The quiet weight of direction. The invisible weight of restraint. The ancient weight of soul. And in return, the world hands him a mirror forged in lies. It tells him, be gentle, but never weak. Speak up, but know your place. Be vulnerable, but only when it's useful. Be stoic, but not too cold. Provide, but don't control. Lead, but only where we allow. What it never tells him is this: be a man, not as performance, not as costume, but as an ontology, a way of being. Now look again, that man is you, and you're bleeding, but not from a wound you can see, from something far more brutal. A war waged not with bullets, but with narratives, not with fists, but with sterilized expectations, not with bloodshed, but with shame. This isn't a war you were drafted into. You were born into it. Every billboard, every teacher, every influencer preaching balance while drowning in chaos. They've all whispered the same lie in 100 different dialects. Your masculinity is dangerous. It must be softened, managed, corrected. You've been taught to flinch at your own power, taught to apologize for your presence, taught to dissect your strength into digestible, non-threatening chunks. And in the process, something sacred was amputated. Not your masculinity, your permission to exist in it. You weren't exiled by force. You were exiled by language, by mockery, by guilt, by 1,000 smiling voices telling you that growth meant neutering your edge. So you adapted. You disguised hunger as patience, rebellion as politeness, rage as overthinking. And one day, you looked in the mirror and couldn't find the man, just a performance, a socially sanctioned shadow wearing your smile. Carl Jung warned us, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But what happens when you're not even allowed to know what the self is? What happens when the masculine soul isn't denied, but reprogrammed? Not suppressed, surgically rewritten. This is not a new war. It is older than language, older than politics, but it's never been more silent, never been more effective, never been more invisible. Because this time, they didn't come for your body. They came for your myth, and they made you the weapon. They handed you a script called ally, a script called nice guy, a script called emotionally available, then stripped you of the one thing you were born to embody: order in the face of chaos, structure in the void, danger harnessed by discipline, presence, direction, command. The masculine soul is not an accessory. It is a necessity, and its erasure isn't progress. It's cultural autoimmune disease. You are not too much. You are the balance to a world that's spiraling inward. So why do you feel numb? Why do you feel like something is dying inside of you, even though everyone around you says you're doing better than ever? Because better means palatable. Better means tamed. And brother, you were not born to be tamed. Let's be clear. This isn't about gender wars. This isn't about men versus women. This is about masculine energy, the soul of it. And what happens when it's sedated? The modern world doesn't destroy the masculine through war. It destroys it through therapy speak and algorithms, through HR departments and TikTok influencers, through passive aggression disguised as compassion, through slow, surgical removal of instinct. One apology, one reframe, one self-help slogan at a time. You're too intense. You need to open up more. You should smile more. You need to process that emotion before you speak. You're being toxic. You're intimidating people. You've heard this voice. It doesn't scream. It seeps. It doesn't punch you. It teaches you to punch yourself. This is the psychological castration of the masculine soul. And make no mistake, it is deliberate. Because a man with direction is dangerous. A man with standards is inconvenient. A man who doesn't ask for permission is untouchable. So they don't fight you. They reshape you. They frame masculinity as pathology, aggression as immaturity, dominance as abuse, discipline as rigidity, boundaries as control. You were told to heal, but only if healing meant silence. You were told to do the work, but only if the work meant staying tame. You were handed the language of introspection, but denied the right to reclaim your instinct. You were told to feel more, but only emotions they approve of: sadness, acceptable, shame, encouraged, grief, celebrated. But rage? Purposeful, focused, grounded rage? Unacceptable. Not because rage is wrong, but because rage is fuel. Because anger, when owned, becomes action. Because pain, when processed, becomes power. And power is the one thing the system cannot domesticate. So they call it toxic. They guilt you into compliance. They brand primal instincts as outdated relics of a patriarchal past. They turn assertiveness into mansplaining, presence into narcissism, command into oppression. What they fear is not abuse. They fear uncorrupted authority. They fear a man who cannot be manipulated, because he knows who he is before they tell him. Carl Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But in this culture, it's not a privilege. It's a rebellion. To embody masculinity, in its raw, grounded, protective, directional form, is now an act of resistance. So they rebrand your nature into something to overcome. You're not allowed to express masculinity. You must negotiate it, water it down, filter it, ask permission. And if you don't, you're punished, not with violence, but with exile. Exile from jobs, from platforms, from dates, from your own tribe. You'll be called dangerous, rigid, cold, problematic. But let me tell you something. It is not your job to be understood. It is your job to embody truth. You are not here to be digestible. You are here to be integral. And if your integrity makes the room uncomfortable, let it burn. You don't feel dead. You feel dull, flat, bored, unmoved, not broken enough to scream, not full enough to sing. You scroll through dopamine hits, stare at screens, listen to motivational clips that sound like prophecy, and still feel nothing. You're not empty because you lack something. You're empty because what's inside isn't you. This is the hollowing, a slow erosion of essence, not an explosion, a leak. Modern men are not starving for success. They're starving for meaning, starving for weight, for something worth bleeding for. But here's the thing no one tells you. Meaning doesn't come from healing. Meaning doesn't come from safety. Meaning doesn't come from affirmations or podcasts or productivity hacks. Meaning is sacrificial. It requires death of the false self. Carl Jung understood this. He said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." So we don't face it. We escape. We specialize in distraction. And we worship two false gods, comfort and performance. Comfort tells you, you're fine the way you are. Performance tells you, you're only worthy if you prove it. And you're stuck in between. One voice telling you to love yourself unconditionally. Another telling you to hustle until you've earned it. But both are lies. Because who you truly are is not static. It is unfolding. And that unfolding, it requires pain. It requires grief. It requires confronting the parts of you that are unlovable. The coward, the addict, the manipulator, the liar, the weakling, the tyrant, the boy pretending to be a man. This is the shadow, the repressed self, the parts you buried in exchange for acceptance. But here's the cost. You became acceptable, but not whole. You became liked, but not known. You became productive, but not powerful. And the result is a spiritual malnourishment that can't be fixed by therapy, relationships, or success. Because none of that touches the wound. You feel numb because you have betrayed the deepest part of yourself. You stopped listening to your own instinct. You started performing for approval, for love, for peace. But peace doesn't come from pleasing others. Peace comes from alignment, from becoming one man, not many masks, from reintegrating the fragments. You feel empty because you have outsourced your sense of self. You built your identity on reactions, not convictions. You let the world tell you who to be, then called that growth. But Jung didn't call that growth. He called it spiritual possession. You are possessed, not by demons, but by ideas that don't belong to you. Be a nice guy. Keep the peace. Don't rock the boat. Don't be aggressive. Suppress your rage. Just go with the flow. This is not growth. This is sedation. The man who avoids anger becomes passive. The man who avoids confrontation becomes manipulative. The man who avoids grief becomes shallow. The man who avoids solitude becomes needy. And the man who avoids his shadow becomes a puppet. You feel empty because you've been cut off from your own depths. You've been domesticated. And domesticated men don't create culture, they inherit it. They don't shape the world, they submit to it. This is the psychic death of the masculine. And most will never escape it. because doing so would mean facing what they've spent their whole lives avoiding. Their cowardice, their dependency, their false virtue. The truth is brutal. You can't heal what you still protect. You can't reclaim what you still reject. You want to feel alive again? Then kill the role. Kill the nice guy. Kill the people pleaser. Kill the peacekeeper. Kill the performance addict. Kill the boy who plays at being a man. Not because he's evil, but because he's in the way. Only by walking into the desert of isolation, the wilderness of yourself, can you confront what's truly real. Your rage, your hunger, your sacred boundaries, your wildness, your clarity, your calling. You are not a spreadsheet to optimize. You are not a trend to follow. You are not a product to sell. You are a force, untamed, undefined, uncompromising. But only if you remember who you are beneath the masks. You will not reclaim yourself through comfort. You will not find your soul in a guided meditation. You will not awaken by endlessly processing your childhood. There is a deeper truth. The masculine returns through fire, not through safety. We are living in a culture where the masculine has been declawed, turned into a self-help slogan, a productivity spreadsheet, or a sanitized, healed version of itself that is harmless, agreeable, emotionally fragile, and constantly apologizing. And most therapy today reinforces this. Jung warned us, the world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, it will tell you. The modern world has answered that question for you, and the answer is weak. You've been told your anger is dangerous, your ambition is toxic, your drive is oppressive, your silence is abusive. But here's the truth. You weren't supposed to be tame. You were supposed to be integrated. There's a difference. The path of individuation, the path Jung laid out, isn't about becoming good. It's about becoming whole. And wholeness includes the parts you've been taught to suppress. The hunger, the fight, the refusal to bend, the primal knowing, the sacred no. This is the reclamation, not of violence, but of volition, not of domination, but of direction, not of superiority, but of sovereignty. Because without sovereignty, you are just reacting to people, to shame, to your trauma, to your programming. You want to stop feeling like a boy? Stop living in response to everyone else's emotions. Stand in your own silence, not to punish, not to manipulate, but because you no longer explain yourself to people who don't even know themselves. Silence is not passive. Silence is possession. A man in silence isn't lost. He's listening to his own soul. This is the antidote to emptiness. Not more content, not more understanding, but inner territory. A grounded man does not chase validation. He does not perform. He does not rehearse his masculinity. He moves from center. And that center can't be built without facing your rage. Yes, rage. Because beneath the numbness, beneath the sadness, beneath the anxiety, there is rage. But not the blind rage of reactivity. Not the child screaming for attention. The rage of the buried self. The rage of betrayal. The rage of silence. The rage of being reshaped into something you're not, for the comfort of others. You cannot heal without meeting that fire. Not suppressing it. Not managing it. Not labeling it toxic. But meeting it. Naming it. Owning it. Forging it into will. This is the beginning of sacred masculinity. Not the aesthetic masculinity of Instagram. Not the stoicism of detached, performative apathy. But the devotional masculinity that is rooted in truth, clarity, and self-responsibility. Where rage becomes conviction. Where silence becomes presence. Where solitude becomes sovereignty. And here's what they never tell you. You will lose people. When you reclaim your fire, your silence, your standards, you will be called arrogant. You will be called aggressive. You will be told you're too much. Let them say it. Because here's the deeper truth. You're not too much. They're just not enough to handle it. They can't metabolize your clarity. They're addicted to ambiguity. They need you to stay soft, confused, and agreeable so they don't have to confront their emptiness. But that's no longer your problem. Because this is your reclamation. And reclamation comes with cost. You may walk alone. You may feel grief. You may even feel fear. But that's how you know you're not performing anymore. You are choosing yourself. Not the version they told you to be. Not the character you rehearsed. Not the healed, polished, palatable man. The whole one. The man who is centered, not balanced. Untamed, not reckless. Devoted, not submissive. Powerful, not performative. The sacred masculine doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't flinch when confronted. It listens. It waits. It watches. Then it acts. With ruthless love. You want to feel full again. Stop seeking softness. Start building strength. Not the strength of armor, but the strength of alignment. The kind that cannot be faked. The kind that doesn't break when the world disapproves. And the kind that calls your soul, not your ego, to lead. You've been taught to fight like a boy. To yell, react, explain. To seek approval before you move. To ask permission before you breathe. But a man who has faced his shadow, a man who has stood in silence until his soul spoke louder than the world, he does not fight like a boy. He doesn't need to. Because he doesn't need to be understood. He needs to be unalterable. Let me be clear. You will not win your life by learning to say the right things. You will not find peace by earning the comfort of those who are threatened by your truth. You will not become whole by negotiating your essence for temporary belonging. You must become untouchable, not invincible, not emotionless, not alpha, untouchable. Untouchable means you know who you are when no one is watching. You move from principle, not approval. You speak from silence, not noise. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also warned us, to truly become yourself is to stand apart, to step out of the collective, to walk through fire alone. And that's where the weapon is forged. Because the man who walks alone, if he survives it, he becomes a furnace. Everything false is burned away. The need for applause, gone. The addiction to validation, gone. The desire to please, gone. What remains? Wait, stillness, clarity, power. True power is not domination. It's not control. It's not winning. True power is the capacity to remain unchanged by the reactions of others. It is the refusal to perform, the mastery of response, the detachment from narrative. This is why your fire matters. Because your fire is not rage. It's not chaos. Your fire is your presence. It's what wakes up when the masks fall off. It's what lives underneath your roles, your wounds, your fears. It is your I am. And no one can give it to you. No one can teach you presence. Presence comes when the false dies. When you stop explaining. When you stop chasing. When you stop apologizing for your hunger. Men who carry presence do not need to be loud. They do not dominate the room. The room conforms to their gravity. They don't seek control. They are control within themselves. They speak less. They listen more. They move deliberately. They wait longer. And they do not tolerate lies, internal or external. That's what makes them dangerous. Not to women, not to society, not to others, but to everything that wants to keep them small. The man who has met his rage and forged it into resolve. The man who has stood in silence until he remembered his name. The man who has buried the need to be enough and risen as whole. He cannot be manipulated. He cannot be bought. He cannot be guilted into betraying himself. Because he has killed the boy inside who wanted to be liked. And crowned the man who is willing to be alone for what is right. So what do? You stop talking so much. You cut half your words in half again. You hold your gaze longer. You start saying no without explanation. You let people misunderstand you, and you let it burn. You show up to your own life like a sovereign, not a servant, not a son waiting for praise. A sovereign. You are the temple. You are the witness. You are the edge. And you don't owe softness to a world that has only ever tried to disarm you. Be kind, yes. Be loving, always. But never be disarmed. The warrior is not dead. He is buried beneath your need to be safe. He is buried beneath your fear of rejection. He is buried beneath your addiction to being healed. But healing doesn't mean softening. Healing means remembering your edge. You want to stop feeling hollow? Stop leaking your energy into people who only love you when you're small. Stop betraying yourself for peace. Stop playing the part of a good man when your soul is screaming for war. Not war against others, war for your selfhood. And here's what they never tell you. The more powerful you become, the lonelier it gets. Because most people are terrified of their own fire, and yours reminds them of everything they buried. Let it. You were not made to be liked. You were made to be known by yourself. And you can't be known until you strip everything false away. So let them go. Let the noise go. Let the approval go. And let the silence reveal what you truly are. You think this is just another video. It's not. This is a mirror, and it's staring back at you. Cold, unforgiving, exacting, Because whether you realize it or not, you are being measured, not by society, not by women, not by your parents, not by me, by something deeper, something older, something that watches from the silence you avoid. Call it God, call it your shadow, call it the self, capital S. It doesn't care what you say. It doesn't care what you post. It doesn't care how articulate your wounds are or how many books you've read. It measures one thing. Did you show up as yourself or as your mask? It asks, did you stand when it was easier to kneel? Did you speak when silence cost you love? Did you walk alone when the herd offered comfort? Did you kill what had to die inside you to be free? Because there is no forgiveness in this judgment, only clarity. The man you pretend to be can fool the world, but he cannot fool the watcher. And the longer you delay, the heavier the cost. Let me say this plainly. You are either killing the lie or feeding it. There is no middle. You don't get to stay neutral. You don't get to float through life avoiding the fire. If you don't choose to burn what's false, life will do it for you. And that fire, when it comes, it won't ask for permission. It will rip you apart. The marriage will collapse. The body will rebel. The depression will crush your spirit. The addictions will eat you alive, until there is nothing left but the raw, unbearable truth. You were the one keeping yourself hollow. You chose safety over sovereignty. You chose the role over the soul. You chose to be understood instead of becoming undeniable. And now you are called, not to heal, not to become better, but to become real, to step forward into the war of being, to fight like a man who remembers what it means to carry weight, to stand with eyes wide open in a world built on illusion, and say, I will not pretend anymore, not for comfort, not for love, not for acceptance, not even for peace, because peace built on pretending is war against the soul. So what will it be? Will you keep playing your part? Smiling, pleasing, performing, until your bones forget who they belong to? Or will you burn the script? Will you kill the role? Will you choose the path of the overman? The man who is not defined by the world, but defines himself? Because here's the final truth you've been avoiding. You were never broken. You were buried. And everything you've called healing, every polite session, every performance of insight, every mask of progress, was just a more acceptable form of hiding. No more. The fire is here. So ask yourself, will you keep feeding the lie? Or will you walk out of the cage, naked, unarmed, and unashamed, and become a man worth remembering? If this cut deep, then good. It was supposed to, because the world doesn't need more nice men. It needs whole ones. If this spoke to you, share it with someone who's ready to hear it. Subscribe for more like this. And remember, your fire is not your enemy. Your fire is your freedom. Welcome back.